Even when I look back on it now, it feels off. Like it was a fever dream from my 20s that I keep remembering wrong. But the part that isn't fuzzy, the part that still hits me in the chest sometimes, is losing him. My friend, this was in Nevada. Not the shiny Vegas part, nothing even close. More like this ugly, half-forgotten stretch of desert that felt like somebody placed a town there by accident and then never came back to check on it. I lived with two other guys at the time, all of us around 22 or 23. We rented this beat-up place near a diner, and there was a junkyard a mile down that always had dogs barking for no reason. That kind of area. The friend I'm talking about, his name was Don, or, well, we called him Don. His real name was longer, something Polish or Czech, I never said it right. He didn't care. He was the type who acted like everything was a joke until it suddenly wasn't. Skinny, messy hair, always wearing these cheap sunglasses even at night, because the dude genuinely thought they made him look mysterious. They didn't. But it was just Don things, you know? He was the one who brought up the cave. It was a random afternoon, hot, boring, nothing happening. We were sitting behind the house on these stupid lawn chairs someone left when they moved out. The plastic was cracked and the legs wobbled. My shirt sticking to my back because the sun was still hitting us, even though it was later in the day. Don comes walking around from the road holding this giant gas station soda, acting like he just came back from discovering a new continent instead of whatever useless detour he took. He started talking before he even sat down. "Bro, I found something out there," he said. "Like a cave, I think." Then he laughed like it wasn't a big deal. But there was this weird, twitchy excitement under it. Our other friend, Mateo, just grunted. He was rolling a cigarette the slowest way possible, probably on purpose. I remember him muttering something like, "Everything out here looks like a cave if you squint." "No, dude, not like a hole. I mean a cave," Don insisted. He kept adjusting his sunglasses even though the sun was setting behind us already. And I swear there were people in it. I thought he meant homeless people or something. We all did, so we didn't care at first. It wasn't unusual for folks to camp out in old mining shafts or abandoned drainage tunnels. We'd seen it. But then he said it differently. I heard people crying. He wasn't joking. His voice dipped just a little, enough for me to glance over at Mateo. Even he paused. "Crying about what?" I asked. "I don't know," Don said. It echoed weird, like far away but close. I can't explain it. I didn't go inside because it smelled kinda metally, like blood, honestly. He had this nervous smile when he said that, the kind where you're half expecting someone to call you stupid. And we did. Mateo laughed first. "Man, you heard coyotes," he said. "They sound like all sorts of shit at night." "It was daytime," Don argued. "Then maybe you hallucinated. You don't drink enough water. You're gonna die out here one day." Don rolled his eyes, but he didn't push it. At least not right then. He kept mentioning the cave. Not obsessively, just slipping it into conversations at totally random times. Like once we were talking about some girl he met at the diner, and mid-sentence he went, "I think I'm gonna go back to that cave soon, by the way." Just dropped it in like he was reminding himself. We didn't take him seriously until he brought it up again during one of our late-night hangs, when everyone's tired and less full of themselves. He said he wanted to go back in a couple of weeks, after payday, because he wanted proper gear. What gear, I don't know. He never bought anything in advance. I remember telling him he was being dramatic. Mateo called him an idiot. Don said we were scared. Whatever. It was normal dumb friend banter. 2 weeks came around and he actually went. We didn't even see him leave that morning. Mateo thought he was still asleep. His bedroom door was closed, and that wasn't weird. Don sometimes slept until 2 p.m. or didn't come home at all. The guy was unpredictable, so when it hit dinner time and he still wasn't back, it didn't feel like an emergency, just annoying. But midnight rolled around and it started feeling wrong. Mateo texted him first, then I called. Nothing. We both tried not to show we were worried, but the silence made it obvious. The next day was worse because his door was still closed. When Mateo pushed it open, I swear the room almost felt colder. But that was probably in my head. His bed was made, which was weird as hell. Don never made his bed. He had half a granola bar on the nightstand, wrappers everywhere like usual, but the backpack he always carried was gone. We looked for a note or something. Nothing. It wasn't until around noon that I remembered the cave thing and said it out loud. Mateo froze for a second like the thought hadn't even registered for him. "You think he actually went?" he asked. He was serious. Mateo rubbed his face and muttered a string of curses. "God, man." We drove out along the stretch of road. Don said he wandered a couple weeks before. The desert looked identical in every direction. That's what made it creepy. You could get lost 10 minutes off the main path and no one would ever know how to find you. We parked near this dried-off ditch and walked around for maybe an hour. Only thing we found were rocks, trash, old bottles, and some rusted metal parts half buried in sand. No cave, nothing even close. When Don didn't show up by the next day, we called the sheriff's department. And depending on where you're from, you might not understand this part, but out there, missing people cases aren't dramatic. They're slow. The cops don't sprint out with helicopters and dogs immediately, especially not for a grown man who might have disappeared on purpose. One of the deputies said pretty openly, "Look, some guys leave for a few days. Maybe he needed space." Don didn't need space. He barely had money for gas. But they did start a search after 2 more days passed. A small one, maybe 5 people. A couple volunteers. They combed through the same area we tried, but obviously wider. The only thing they found was his shoe. Mateo recognized it instantly. It was one of those cheap canvas shoes Don always bought from Walmart because he said they were light and breathable, which was funny because they tore apart every 3 months. The cops said the shoe had blood on it. That part made me numb. I don't know how to describe it better. Just numb. But here's the part nobody has a good explanation for. The blood wasn't Don's. They told us that later. One of the deputies even came by our house to ask if he'd been in any fights recently or gotten mixed up with anyone he shouldn't have. But Don was harmless. Loud, annoying sometimes, but harmless. No enemies, no weird debts, no shady lifestyle, nothing. And it wasn't like the shoe was ripped apart or chewed on by animals. It looked placed, like someone set it there carefully. The investigation fizzled out after a couple months. No body, no other belongings, no witnesses. People in the area had their own theories. Said Don just got sick of everything and ran off. Some said he probably OD'd in a ditch somewhere. He didn't even do drugs. And his family was so screwed up that maybe he went back to them or they came to get him. His family never called us. Not once. They didn't even ask for updates. I used to wonder if maybe they weren't surprised he vanished. Mateo believed the "he ran away" idea for a while, not because it made sense, but because it was easier to swallow than whatever else could have happened. But deep down we both knew he didn't leave voluntarily. He wouldn't have left without his wallet, without telling at least one of us. He didn't trust anybody except maybe Mateo, and me on good days. The cave thing kept eating at us. We went looking again a few times, even when we knew it was pointless. We walked further out each trip, sometimes getting sunburned so bad we couldn't lift our arms right for days. But nothing. Just the same dead desert with the same rattlesnake holes and old mining debris. Nobody ever found a cave-like thing. No opening in the rock, no tunnel, no depression in the ground, nothing you could even mistake for one. I remember one time we stood out there in the heat and Mateo said, "What if he lied about the cave? What if he met someone instead?" I thought about that for weeks. Still do. A year later we moved away. We were just broke and tired of the whole area. But I'd be lying if I said it didn't feel like leaving a grave behind. Every once in a while I try to convince myself Don's alive somewhere. Maybe he really did bail. Maybe he joined some weird group. Maybe he hitchhiked out and now he's working at a bar in some other state under a fake name. But the shoe and the blood, especially the blood. Who the hell did it belong to? And why was it on his shoe? I've had people try to tell me theories over the years. Some think he tangled with the wrong people. Some think he fell in an abandoned shaft and the shoe got kicked loose. Some say maybe the cave he talked about was real but hidden, collapsed or half buried, and we just didn't look in the right spot. It's how sure he was about going back. Like he wasn't just curious. Like something about it was calling him, pulling him in a way he didn't fully understand. I think that's the part that hits hardest. He wasn't scared. He wasn't confused. He was drawn to it. And whatever was in that stretch of desert, that cave, that whatever the hell, It kept him, and nobody ever found where or why. And the longer it's been, the more I'm convinced we never will. I'm Mandy. At the time, I was living in this apartment in a rural-ish area. Like, not farm rural, a bunch of empty land, and the roads don't even have proper sidewalks. Rent was good, and the place itself was okay. Second floor of a two-story building, kind of boxy looking. It was evening. I'm thinking maybe around 6. I was outside because I'd just gotten off a phone call and needed air. I was leaning against the railing near the front, scrolling my phone with one hand and drinking a warm bottle of that peach iced tea they sell everywhere. That pointless detail probably doesn't matter, I know. I just remember it because the drink tasted weirdly flat that day. So I'm standing there, kind of zoning out, and I get that weird feeling. I look to the side of the building, and there's this bald guy standing half behind the corner. Like, angled. Like his body was just slightly turned. Like he was pretending he wasn't staring, but very much was. His head was completely smooth, and I remember that because the sunset was hitting it in this sharp orangey shine that made it look like plastic. His face, I don't know how to describe his face, but something was off. Like he wasn't thinking anything, at all. His hands were in his pockets, deep in his pockets, like elbows forward, shoulders slightly hunched. That stuck with me more than his face, actually. Might have been shorter, but it felt too long, and he just kept looking at me, not blinking. Then he walked off. The way he did it made it feel intentional, like he wanted to make sure I knew he was leaving on his own terms, not because I saw him. I remember muttering, "Okay, nope," under my breath, and I went inside immediately. The front door is one of those heavy metal ones you have to lean your shoulder against to close properly, and I remember doing that and feeling my heart beat in my ears. I don't scare easily, but something about that felt wrong in a way I couldn't articulate. My apartment was on the second floor, like I said, so you have to take this concrete staircase that echoes like crazy. I climbed it quick, like 2 steps at a time, locked the door behind me, did that thing where you stand there listening for a minute to see if anyone followed you. I tried to shake it off. I made some instant noodles, watched some videos, folded laundry. Night rolls in. Around 10:30, give or take. I had the lights off in the living room, but the TV was on low volume. I remember it was some cooking competition show, and one guy was yelling about undercooked chicken. I only mention that because the yelling startled me a little. My nerves were still off from earlier. I went to close the curtains because I suddenly felt like the windows were too exposed. They weren't even open wide, they were just slightly parted because the air had been warm earlier. But something about that thin line of darkness felt like it was staring back at me. So I walk over, grab the edge of the curtain, and I see it. Not even the whole thing, just movement. The shadow of someone standing outside on my balcony, the outline cut across the faint light from the street lamp outside. I swear, my whole body just locked. My hand stopped midair. That stupid cooking show was still going, but it sounded like it was underwater. The balcony is small, really small, like 2 people could stand there if they didn't mind touching small, and I hadn't opened the sliding door in days. Slowly, I pulled the curtain an inch more to the side, just enough to peek. It was the same man, the bald guy. He was standing completely still, both hands jammed deep into his pockets again, shoulders slightly hunched, but this time, he was facing the window directly, like he'd been waiting for me to look. My apartment's balcony is impossible to get to from outside. Let me emphasize that. There's no ladder, no nearby tree, no drain pipe anyone could climb. It's literally a flat wall. The only way onto it is through my sliding door. I was whispering, "What the hell?" but it came out sort of shaky. I opened the window just a crack. Maybe stupid, I know, but I didn't want to scream through the glass. "What are you doing?" I asked him. He didn't speak. He didn't even move his head. His breathing wasn't visible, or maybe I just couldn't see it in the dim light. I tried again. "Hey, what do you want?" Nothing came out. Then he shifted. It was sudden, like he twitched forward a bit, and then he pulled one of his hands from his pocket. I couldn't see what he was holding. If he was holding anything. His knuckles were pale, though. And then he slammed his hand against the glass. The sound was so loud it felt like it should have shattered instantly. The whole window rattled and I actually stumbled backward. He slammed it again and again. The glass was bending inward with each hit. I ran. I didn't even think. I bolted out of the living room, grabbed my phone, and ran into the hallway. I could hear the pounding from across the apartment. I remember screaming something like, "Help, please!" as I sprinted down the stairs. My socks slipped on the steps and I almost fell. I think I scraped my elbow on the wall, but I didn't register it until way later. I burst outside and ran toward the road, calling the police while I was shaking. My voice cracked when I tried to explain what was happening. The dispatcher asked me if I knew the man. I said no about 6 times. She told me to stay somewhere well lit and wait for officers. I was embarrassed by how hysterical I sounded, but the officers were actually nice about it. They told me to stay back while they went in to check. I sat on the curb the whole time, hugging my knees, staring at the dark windows of my apartment like something was about to appear in them. Finally, they came down. They asked me to show them exactly where I'd seen the man so they could understand the angle, whatever that means, and asked if I'd recently had issues with a neighbor, ex-partner, anyone who might try to scare me. I told them no, absolutely not. They told me something that honestly made my skin crawl worse than the whole earlier part. There was no one on the balcony. There were no footprints. The sliding door was still locked from inside. And this part really threw me. There were no marks on the glass. None. They said I heard something fall, or maybe someone downstairs had been banging something. But no, where the balcony is, no sound from below could travel like that, and the window had rattled hard. I felt it. When they asked if maybe I had been half asleep or startled by something else, I got defensive. I remember saying, "I'm telling you he was there. He was right there. He hit the glass. Did you not hear me?" They exchanged that look. You know the one. Like they were trying to be polite but didn't believe a word of it. I didn't want to go back inside. I really didn't. But they told me they'd walk through the entire place, check the doors and windows, and everything was secure. I did sleep elsewhere that night, at my coworker's place. I didn't even bring clothes. I just showed up with my phone and my keys and a bottle of water I grabbed from their fridge, without asking because I was shaking so badly I needed to hold something. In daylight, the balcony looked so normal it made me uncomfortable, like it was pretending. Where he had been standing, there should have been prints, something. Even if he somehow climbed, the railing should have had smudges. The ground should have been disturbed, something. But it was pristine. I lived there another month, but I barely slept. Every night I'd sit staring at the curtains, thinking I saw movement. I shoved a chair under the handle of the sliding door. I put things in front of my bedroom door too, even though I knew it was silly. I can't shake that blank face, the way he stood, the twitch forward, the pounding, the hands in pockets, that impossible height, that feeling he wasn't surprised at all that I saw him, like he wanted to be seen. I moved out, obviously. I live in the city now. I have neighbors on all sides and noise everywhere, which sounds awful but actually helps me sleep. I'll be walking somewhere crowded, like a grocery store aisle or a train platform, and I'll think I see him from the corner of my eye. Bald head, hands in pockets. It's never him. Probably. He wasn't even trying to break in. He was already exactly where he wanted to be. And I guess that's the part that really sticks with me, not knowing how he got there or why he left, or what he had been waiting for. It happened a long time ago, 12, 13 years. Closer to 15, actually. I guess it doesn't matter. What matters is that I still think about it more often than I tell people. And yeah, I know the whole town still brings up that one guy who was found out in the woods, the one everyone said went through something too strange to explain. That's literally what folks said for months. Not even like they were hiding details, just that nobody could describe it in a way that made sense. People avoided specifics, like the whole thing was cursed to talk about. You'd hear things like, what they found wasn't right, or the scene didn't look natural, or the sheriff looked pale for a week, that kind of stuff. I wasn't close to the guy. I think he worked at some store for a while. Or maybe I'm mixing people up. Small towns make everyone's face blend into one file in your brain. That wasn't even the part that messed with me. What stuck with me is what happened a few days after the whole incident, or whatever you want to call it, and then what happened after that. I'll try to say this like a normal story, but don't expect it to flow. Let me back up. This town had one trail everyone used. Technically, it branched into a few different paths, but everyone called the whole thing the trail, like it was the only place you could walk your dog or jog or pretend you were outdoorsy. It cut through this patch of woods that wasn't big enough to get lost in, but big enough that at night it felt like someone muted the whole world. I walked it almost every evening with my dog, Rob. He was getting older back then, graying around the mouth, a little slower on hills, but he still wagged like he had a motor in him. This was maybe a week after the thing with the guy in the woods. The town felt tense in a way you don't explain out loud. More eyes on strangers, more porch lights left on, you know? You could feel people thinking. So that one night, I'm walking Rob like usual, and I remember the dirt under my shoes was softer than normal, like maybe it rained earlier. These are the useless details my brain remembers instead of birthdays. At the bend before the long straight stretch, I saw someone up ahead, just a guy walking, sort of slow, hands in his pockets. Not weird on its own, people walk alone all the time. But Rob did this thing he rarely did. He kind of stopped and stared like he was reading something in the guy's posture. I don't want to make this dramatic, but it put this uncomfortable ripple in my stomach. The guy didn't turn, kept walking like his feet were heavy or like he was thinking too hard. His coat was this dark green color, almost brown and a little too big for him. That's what I remember most. The sleeves covered part of his hands. I wasn't scared yet. I was uneasy. A slow, crawling unease that you don't fully register. I told myself to just keep walking, so I did. Passing him was the strange part. When I got closer, Rob pulled a bit, sniffing the dirt and then the air and then the guy's direction again. I muttered some awkward hey or evening kind of thing. I genuinely don't remember what slipped out, but the guy didn't respond, didn't even look up. He just kept that same slow, dragging walk. But the second I passed him, I swear I felt something shift behind me. I can't explain that right. I tried not to look back immediately because I didn't want to seem paranoid, or maybe I didn't want to confirm the feeling. 10 steps later, Rob looked over his shoulder. That's what did it. Not me. Him. So I looked too. The guy wasn't turning around or anything dramatic like that. He was just standing still, on the trail, facing my direction, still as a lamppost. I pretended I didn't see, picked up the pace. The whole time, the hairs on the back of my arms were lifting like static. When I reached the fork that leads toward my street, something made me finally glance again. He was walking now, toward us. And I suddenly didn't care about being polite anymore. I tugged Rob's leash and said his name like we were late for something, and we left that trail faster than I normally walk anywhere. My heart was in that jittery rhythm where it doesn't know whether to run or think. I thought it ended when I got home. By the time I reached my street, I felt stupid for letting a stranger freak me out. People walk behind each other all the time. Maybe he lived on the same street. I said all this to myself to calm down. I remember fumbling the keys because my hands were cold. Rob was pacing in that anxious dog way like he wanted water or food or reassurance, and I finally got the door open. I stepped inside, closed it, locked it, so I let it go, or tried to. Then I looked out the window, not on purpose. The curtains were slightly open, and I don't know why I glanced out, because I wasn't expecting anything. Maybe a neighbor walking their dog or a car passing. But there he was, standing on the sidewalk across from my house. He wasn't looking at the house directly, I don't think. His head was tilted down a bit, but he was angled toward my yard, and I swear to you, swear on anything, there was absolutely no way he could have walked that distance faster than me. Not unless he jogged or cut through yards or something. But the way he showed up, it felt like he materialized from the side of the street, just there, like he blinked into position. My hands felt numb. Rob started whining softly, which is something he only did when thunderstorms were coming. The guy didn't move. I didn't move. A long, awful minute passed where I talked myself into believing it wasn't him. Could have been any guy with a similar coat. People dressed the same. He turned slightly, like a minimal shift of his shoulders, and walked off. Just calmly, like he hadn't been standing across from my house staring into nowhere. He disappeared around the corner. 3 days later, they found him. I was drinking coffee at the kitchen table when my neighbor texted me something like, "They found someone on the trail," and my stomach dropped before I even read further. I walked outside just to see if other people were talking. They were. Little clusters on porches. I asked what happened. Someone said they found a man on the trail early in the morning. Someone walking their dog spotted him on the far side near the dried-up creek, a still shape on the ground. They described it quietly, like the whole block didn't need to hear it. It looked like he'd caused the whole thing himself. Caused the whole thing himself, which is the town's polite way of avoiding heavier words. Someone added that the scene didn't look right, and said something about the man maybe being mentally unwell. Nobody said anything definite, because nobody knew anything definite. But I did. I recognized the description of the coat. I didn't say a word. Some people said he must have been overwhelmed by something in his life, said he looked like he'd walked for hours before the end, pacing in different spots, leaving strange patterns in the dirt. People love drama, that's what I told myself. But I kept thinking of the guy who was found earlier that month, the one the whole town refused to describe. The too strange to explain one. And I kept remembering how the man on the trail looked at me without looking at me. How he followed at that slow, impossible speed. How he appeared across from my house like he stepped out of the air. I started wondering if the two situations were connected. Like maybe the first guy didn't meet a random fate in the woods. Maybe the man I saw was involved. Maybe he'd been out there the night the other guy was found. Maybe whatever happened during that first situation came back for him too. Or maybe he'd been carrying guilt, or fear, or consequences. Or maybe he was just a stranger with a heavy coat and a sad story I'll never know. I don't pretend to understand it. No one ever confirmed his name publicly. No photo in the paper. You know, the way he stood across from my house, like he wanted something, or like he was trying to warn me, or like he didn't know where else to go. Sometimes I wonder if he followed me because he thought I could help him, or because he thought I knew something, or because I just happened to walk past him at the wrong second and whatever weight he carried clung to me for a moment. I don't know. Sometimes I tell myself none of it means anything. Random stranger, random timing, a coincidence that felt heavier because of the stuff that happened earlier that month. But the way people talked about the first guy, how the scene didn't look natural, how no one wanted to describe it. And then the second guy showing up on the trail days later, acting like he was made of static and silence, and then being found after causing his own end. It's too many strange things in one line. When people ask why I don't walk the trail much anymore, I just say my dog got old, which is true. But even after Rob passed, I still didn't go back. Definitely not near that bend. For a few seconds that night, I'm almost certain the man wasn't following me. He was running from something else. Something I didn't see. Something just behind him. And whatever that something was, it's still out there, somewhere in those woods. And I'm pretty sure that's why nobody ever explained what happened to either of them. Because nobody can. And nobody wants to.